Hey, what's going on? It's Justin from Inlight Studio. Today I'm going to be sharing a tutorial on how I edit lens flare in Photoshop. Woohoo! So one of the things I love about photography is obviously the ability to capture light. That's what photography is in its essence, is just capturing that. And it's even one of the reasons why I named my business Inlight Studio. Yeah, it's just the beauty of it and the different ways that it can hit the lens and creating backlight and all those kind of things. Sometimes though, you'll find yourself being on a shoot and the weather doesn't always work as well with you, or because of like logistical reasons you have to shoot at a certain time of the day. So you can't always create that effect that you do want. One of the awesome things about Photoshop is that it has a lens flare filter, and you can actually use that to fake lens flare at times if need be. So today I'm just going to show you a quick way of how I sometimes do that on shots, just to make it brighter and look the way that I want it to and stick with my style. So it's going to be good. Let's have a look.
Okay, cool. So here we are in Photoshop. This is a photograph I took of my girlfriend while we were out in a place called Hookfall in Wilderness. If you don't know where that is, Google it. But yeah, so this is the before shot. That's what it came out of the camera. The light was really cool and looks nice. But then I always like adding a bit of lens flare and just like this orangey glow to it, so just kind of stays consistent with my style, and I just like the way it looks. I love shooting into the light, so this is a good example of how you can change the light of a shot just with a few techniques. So let me show you how I did this. If we break this down, this is a lens flare and just added to it, and this is the kind of warm hit. I don't really know what you call it, but yeah, just like this big feather ball that goes on top of it. So it's fairly simple to do this in Photoshop. Let's just start with the clean image. So this is nothing but the photograph, and then first thing we want to do is, let's get rid of that. Just going to make a new layer. So this button over here, say new layer, and then we're going to go to the gradient tool. So it's this one over here. Sometimes it actually has the paint bucket tool as the default, so you just click and hold, change it to the gradient tool, and then you go up here, double click on this, and this lets you set the colors of it. So we'll start there, leave it at white, that's fine, and change this one to like a very saturated red color, actually a little bit more orangey, somewhere there. And then you can click to add another color to the gradient, and then maybe make this a bit more yellowy, somewhere there, just so you can see getting like a nice smooth color palette to work with. You can actually double click on it and change if you need to. There you go. Cool. So click OK when you're done. And then sometimes the gradient tool is by default on this linear gradient. We're going to change that to the circular one or the radial one. And then I want the light to come more or less from this spot over here, because as you can see, that's where it's naturally coming from. So we're just going to click and then drag a line. So this is going to determine the size of the gradient. So let go. There you go, created that. So that looks good. Looks like a ball that we can work with. So now the next thing is, obviously it's everywhere. We need to tone this down a bit. Is we're going to add a mask to it. So that's this button over here. And then we're going to go up here to the selection tools and go to the elliptical marquee tool. So change this to that, and then click and drag a circle. If you press spacebar while you haven't let go of clicking it, you can move this around. If you let go of spacebar, you can just keep changing the shape, move it around. So you just want to select this, just create a good circle around this area that's fading off, and then let go. So now it's made a selection of that. And then actually we can delete the layer mask. So I did that backwards, sorry. You first got to make the selection and then click on the layer mask button, and it makes a mask out of that selection that we just had. So it basically just cuts it out as if it was a stencil. And then you're going to double click on this and change the feather. It's quite high, so that's going to soften the edges. just so it doesn't have that hard cut. There we go, that's good. And then the next step is to change the blending mode. So you click, it was on the master, click off and click on that. Now up here I'm going to change this to screen, which is that blending mode there, and that's just going to make it fit better into the image. So already it's starting to work. Now we can change the strength of it, because it doesn't need to be this harsh. So we change the opacity, just drop it a little bit. Also, you might notice that since we just randomly chose colors, it might not fit into the shot, it might be slightly off. So since it's on its own layer, we can use the hue saturation adjustment layer. So this one up here, just click on that, and then you're going to click this button, which tells it to affect the layer beneath it only. Because if I didn't do that, if we change things, it's affecting the entire shot, which I don't want it to do. So by clicking this, it's only going to affect this layer underneath it, so which is currently this lens hit. So now if I shift, I can actually just shift the color of that layer only. So just make it fit in a bit. So I'll drop the saturation, maybe push it a bit, just slightly. It's just to make it seem like it actually belongs there. Just a little bit too strong. There we go, it seems to be a bit more natural. Cool. Next thing is, we've also got to mask a part of this away because it's too much over a face. So with the mask selected again, I'm going to go to the brush tool, just reset the brushes to black and white, and then with the black brush, let's make this really big, and just paint away from certain areas where the light shouldn't be showing through. So you can watch there on the mask of what it's doing. I'm busy painting black over this area, so it's just not allowing the effect to show through on these areas where it's black. So anything that's white is where the effect is coming through, and anything black is where it's been blocked, or like it's been stenciled almost, which is what a mask does. So that looks good. You can see what it's doing. So it's creating this cool flare around her. Just further some more. If you make a mistake, you can just switch the brush back to white just to paint some more of it back in again, because when light hits someone from behind, it does kind of have a bit of fall over and spill across them, so you do want some light to hit over. So that looks cool. There you go. And again, you can change the opacity if the effect feels too strong. You can just drop it a bit so that it sits in there nicely. That looks good. Maybe just get rid of it over her eye slightly. There we go, cool. So, fairly simple. Just by adding those two things, we've already added a cool flare to it. And then the next thing is to add a lens flare. So, the interesting thing with Photoshop lens flares is that when you put them on, they're set into the existing image, so you can't change anything about it once it's on there. So let me just show you. If you go to Filter, Render, and Lens Flare, it's got some presets here which you can choose from. Most of the time I would use the 50 to 300 zoom, but it just depends on what you want it to look like. So there's different ones here. So if I put the lens flare about there where the sun is coming from, just drop brightness a bit and say OK, it's now applied it to the image and I can't do anything with it. It's basically rendered onto the image, so it's stuck there. It has to stay this way. So a way that we can work around that is if we go back, go to Render, Lens Flare, and you first just got to get your placement of where you want it to be. So I want it to come from over there where the light actually is, and then I'm going to click OK. So it puts it on, but it's not editable like I mentioned. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Edit, Undo Lens Flare, and then we're going to create another new layer. So it puts one right on top. I'm going to fill this layer with black. Just paint bucket tool and just fill it with black. There you go. And then you're going to go to Filter, and you're going to use this lens flare, not Render Lens Flare, because this sets a new one. But this one up here redoes the last effect that you applied. So it's going to remember exactly where I placed it with the same settings. So there we go. It's right there. And now you change the blending mode to screen. And there we go, it fits right in, but the difference is now is that this is on a separate layer, so this can move and it can be edited, which is perfect for what I want to do. So now I can take another hue saturation layer, and I can again tell it to affect the layer beneath only, and now I can actually shift the color of just the lens flare without it affecting everything else. So just the lens flare is changing. So I can drop the saturation if I want to and change the color of the lens flare. Let me just make it somewhere around there. And the other cool thing is that since it's rendered in Photoshop, it's very sharp, and it's obviously a computation, it's not the real thing. So to make it fit into the image, I actually need to blur it slightly so that it looks a bit more realistic. So now that it's on a separate layer, I can go to blur, Gaussian blur, and you can see on the lens has disappeared because it's so blurred, but if we go back, it's stronger again. So maybe I'll just give it a little bit of a blur so that it fits in nicely and it's not so sharp, so somewhere around there. And blur it nicely, and then you can also, since it's on a separate layer, you can change the opacity so that it doesn't shine through as prominently. There you go, that fits a bit better. And that's it, just in a few couple steps. Last thing I'll do is add a curve adjustment and just maybe make it pop a bit, just for editing style's sake. This is obviously depending on what kind of style you want to go for. I like to give them a bit of a faded blacks. There we go. So just to recap, let's turn all of these off to show you the step. So that was the original. We made a gradient, applied that over with hue saturation. We could then affect the layer beneath it, then added a lens flare, change the color of that, and then just final tonal adjustments. And that's it. A few easy steps, and I just added some cool lighting effects to a shot. It just gives it a bit more of a dramatic look to it. So that's how I get my style on some shots that I take. I hope there's something useful there. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.